Can we have a function without a name? We can, using lambda functions. Lambda functions are very useful whenever we wanted to write a small piece of code and it don't require any name. So in this video, we will be completely knowing about lambda functions. What are lambda functions, when it is used, what are the real advantages of lambda function. So watch the video till the end so that you can able to understand very clearly about lambda functions and write effective code whenever you are developing a code using lambda functions. So having said that, welcome to the series of everything you need to know about Python in simplest possible way. So lambda functions also referred as anonymous functions, which means it doesn't have any name. So how does that work? So let us first understand the syntax of lambda functions and we will compare the lambda functions with the actual functions, and by which you can able to understand real usage of lambda functions whenever we wanted to use a small piece of code whenever we don't require any name for the function. So first we will understand the syntax of lambda functions. So lambda functions is typically mentioning by using lambda keyword. So lambda keyword is used to define this lambda function. So after that, it will take args. So when I mention args, these are nothing but arguments. So we will be passing arguments, right? Those are considered as args. After that, we will be having expression. So in our function, we typically return some value, right? That is what we will be representing as expression in lambda function. So as a whole, this is the whole syntax of lambda functions, and we can represent the lambda functions in this way. So let us go ahead and see one example and understand the lambda function with that example. And after that, we will compare the lambda function with the actual named function so that you can able to compare and understand very clearly about lambda function and actual function. So let us go ahead and take one example. So what the example that I wanted to take is that I will take a number as an argument and I will square that number. So that is what I wanted to do here. So now in order to do that, first we need to mention this lambda, right? So by using this lambda only, we can able to represent the lambda function. So the argument I am taking, which is nothing but number here. So I will take an argument. So in this function, we will take an argument and we will square that number. So which is nothing but number here, right? So I'm mentioning num, and after that I'm mentioning one more num here. So if I execute this, this is got executed. So you can see function main lambda here. So this is nothing but a function name, which is nothing but this is a lambda function, and the argument that it will take, which is nothing but number here. So we are getting something like this, right? So now what I will be doing is that I will assign this function to a variable name. So for that reason, I am taking a variable which is nothing but square here. So I am assigning this whole lambda function to this square variable. So now if I execute this, this is got executed. So now what we can do is that we can use this variable name to call this function. So we are taking a variable which is nothing but square here. So by using this variable, we can call this function and we will get the result. So now if I use this variable name and if I pass the number, so that is what the lambda function takes as an argument, right? Let's say if I pass 2 here and if I execute this, you can get the result which is nothing but 2, which is nothing but 4. That is what the result 2 square, 2 into 2, which is nothing but 4, right? Let's say if I take one more variable, so one more value, let's say I'm taking 5 here, and if I execute this, we are getting 25, which is nothing but 5 square, which is nothing but 5 into 5, which is 25, right? So like this, we can able to get the result by passing a value here. So this is a small function, right? So lambda functions are very useful when we wanted to do some kind of operation which is very small. So when you wanted to do some large operations, in such case, lambda is not preferred. You can go with actual named function. So now what we will be doing is that we will compare this lambda function. So in this function, we are taking one variable which is nothing but number, one argument. After that, we are processing and we are returning some value, right? So we will compare this lambda function with the actual function and know the advantage of lambda function. So in order to define this same function using actual function, what we can do is that first we need to mention the def keyword, and after that we need to mention the function name here. So what I will be doing is that I will take square 1 here. So this we have taken as a square, right? So for that reason, I am taking the function name as square 1 here. So after that, I will take a variable, I will take an argument which is nothing but number here. So after that, what we need to do in order to get the number as a square, we need to mention number into number, and after that we need to return that, right? So that is what I am doing now here. And if I execute this, this is got executed, and in order to get some result, we need to call this function, right? So for that reason, I am mentioning square 1, and if I pass 5 here, and if I execute this, we are getting 25. So both are worked similarly. This is square lambda function and this is square actual function with the name both work similarly, but the difference is that this lambda function is considered as faster execution than named function. So in this named function, if you could observe carefully, we are defining this function with a name, and after that we are returning the result after doing some process. So in this case, we don't have any name in the lambda function. Because of that reason, the process of execution of lambda function is faster than compared with actual function which is having a name here. So after that, here we are returning the result, right? So in this case, when we have lambda function, we don't need to mention any return statement. The expression itself will return some value. So that is what the advantage of using a lambda function. So by this, I hope you can able to understand the difference between actual function and lambda function. Lambda functions are very useful whenever you wanted to code some very small piece of code. In this case, we are taking just a square, right? So in this kind of a cases, lambda functions are very useful. Let's say you have some large operations you wanted to do with the function. In such case, better you go with this actual name of a function. So I hope you can able to understand the difference. So let us go ahead and see with one example. By that example, I will hope you can able to understand the usage of lambda function more clearly. So for that reason, what I will be doing is that I am taking a lambda function here, and after that, what I wanted to do here is that I wanted to add two numbers. That's it. No big deal. Add two numbers. So this is a small process, right? Adding of two numbers. In such case, instead of defining a function and doing all the process, we can simply define a lambda function to do this small process, right? So for that reason only, I am going with lambda function. So for that, I am mentioning number 1 as an argument and number 2 as argument. So we will be taking these two numbers as arguments. So after that, what we can do is that I will just mention number 1 plus number 2 here. That's it. We don't need to define, we don't need to mention any return statement or anything as such. This is an expression, right? Number 1 and number 2, and this will be returned exactly what the result it will give. So now what I will be doing is that I will assign this lambda function to a variable. So let's say I am taking add here. So I am assigning this lambda function to add, and if I execute this, this is got executed. Let's say if I take this add and if I pass, let's say some two numbers, let's say I am passing 2 and 3, and if I execute this, we are getting the result which is 5. Let's say if I give, let's say 4 and 5, and if I execute this, we are getting 9, which is the sum of 4 plus 5. So in this way, we can actually use this lambda function whenever we wanted to write a small piece of code inside of a function. So I hope you can able to understand the usage of lambda function, and I hope you can compare the actual function with lambda function and see the difference. So one is whenever you wanted to write small piece of code inside of function, better you go with the lambda function, and when you wanted to write a big operations or larger operations, in such case you better go with the actual function which will be having a name. So apart from that, this lambda function is considered as faster execution than the actual function which is having a name and which is return some values. So I hope you can able to understand that. Apart from that, lambda functions are very useful whenever we wanted to pass a function as argument. So there are some function which will take the function as argument and do the process, which are considered as a map, filter, and reduce. So these are very useful whenever we wanted to process the data, whenever we wanted to transform the data. So that we will see in the next video. So I hope you have found this video interesting. If that is true, hit the like button, and to stay updated with my latest videos, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications to all, so that whenever I upload any video, you will get the notification. So thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.